Hello again everyone from Tokyo, Japan, and welcome back to Japan Vintage Camera. Coming to you from indoors tonight because it's a very beautiful day outside. That sounds kind of strange for me to say that, but the places where I like to shoot videos outdoors are very crowded and noisy today. It's a very beautiful day. It's been warm and sunny and clear, and a lot of people have decided to come out and enjoy the weather. This may be the last really nice weekend we have before the winter season sets in. And at the park across the way, they just finished with the holiday decorations and lights yesterday. Those of you who like my videos, maybe you saw my video from last night where I walked around the Midtown Shopping Center and the park to look at the lights. It's quite a lot busier today than it was last night. So I'm in here shooting. Today's video is going to be about a folding medium format camera, medium format rangefinder camera. And this is a Wester, another Wester. This is the third one which I've done a review about. And I really like these cameras. I've come across a few of these recently, and I pick them up when I can because they really are well made and well designed cameras. They aren't quite as popular as the other ones which we see. These were made mostly for the Japanese market. A few of them were taken home by servicemen and such like that. But a really high quality camera. You can usually tell when I pick up a camera how well it's made. And I look at this one, first I can feel it has some weight to it. So they didn't skimp on the aluminum and brass and other materials when they manufactured it. Then I look at the steel which goes around the back of the door, and the paint is really nice despite the fact that this was made in the mid-1950s. It's nice and shiny, there's no corrosion. The leatherette is embossed with, on the back it says Wester 6. It's quite beautiful and still in remarkable condition for its age. The chrome finish is really nice. It's very heavy, a nice satin finish to it. It doesn't scratch off easily on Wester cameras, and everything else just looks really nice. It feels really good. Japan produced quite a few cameras which were, I guess, lower end cameras for the mass market, and I can tell one of those the moment I pick it up, but this is definitely a really nice camera. So, this is going to be kind of a step-by-step review and how to use the camera, and this is going to be kind of geared toward people who want to buy one of these cameras but have never used one before. So for those of you who have a bit more experience with these cameras, bear with me while I'll cover the features of it as we go along. First, a quick description. The Wester S2 is kind of a middle range camera, more sophisticated and more expensive than entry-level simple cameras, but less complicated and less expensive than the higher end models which had more features. It is a rangefinder camera, but it has an uncoupled rangefinder. And rather than the lens assembly where you move the entire lens and shutter assembly, this is kind of like the earlier Zeiss Icon cameras with the Tessar or similar lenses where just the front lens element moves in and out. And this is a dual format camera. So you can shoot either 6x4.5 or 6x6 formats. And this particular camera is lucky enough to still have the 6x45 mask, which is quite hard to find. And collectors end up spending as much money for a mask as they do for a camera, if they really need one badly. So I'll go ahead and open up the back and show you how to load the film in one of these cameras. These usually open on one side or the other. There's no rule. Sometimes the winder's on the right side, sometimes it's on the left side depending on the make. On this one it's on the right side, as is the latch for the door. I pull open this with my finger here and the door opens. And inside here you can see this one has a take-up spool in place. Whenever I sell a camera, a medium format camera or a film back, I always make sure to include a take-up spool because there's nothing worse than buying one of these cameras and ordering film for it, and then you get it and you don't have a take-up spool and you can't use it. Now you can get these things for next to nothing on Amazon or even free from many camera shops, but it takes time to get one, so I always make sure that I have one handy. So the first thing you need to do with one of these cameras is put the take-up spool on the side with the film winder. And you can usually identify the winder because it has an arrow on it. This side is the focusing wheel for the rangefinder. There's no arrow on it. The arrow is on this side. To make it easier to put in the film spool, I kind of turn it so that the slot, or I guess the wings on the pin here, are flat. And you can see kind of it has the same pattern on here. So with that laying flat, I'll go ahead and set this or orient it the same way. And I'll pull down on the button on the bottom, and that allows me to slide in the take-up spool more easily. I said I did that to make it easier, but of course, I always end up playing with these things no matter what. Alright, so it's in, I let go of the button, and it locks the take-up spool in place. Sometimes it's a little bit off-center. If you wiggle the spool around, this will click into place, and then that's ready. Putting in the film is a little bit easier because there are no tabs. There's just a single key here on the top, or a pin, and you pull down the bottom of this button, you put the film roll here, so the hole in the top of the film roll goes around the pin, push it down in and release this and make sure it sets and the roll is flat. Pull the paper across the lens and feed it into the slot on the take-up spool. Try to put it in kind of deeply, because as you turn the take-up spool, the spool usually turns but the paper pulls out, and it's kind of annoying. Sometimes you have to do it 2 or 3 times to get it in there. Push it in kind of deep. This one here has kind of a thinner parts on either side of the take-up spool. These old steel ones, they bite better than the newer plastic ones. I'll usually put the paper in there and I'll hold it flat with my finger and I'll press it down like so until it wraps around a couple of times. And I keep winding and winding, and the paper pulls and pulls and pulls, and then you get the arrow diagram on the back, with just a line across with arrow points on both sides. And I wind it until it's kind of like in the middle of the film chamber over the lens. And then I close the door and make sure to latch it, and make sure the latch is all the way down. It's really annoying if the film door pops open when you don't want it to. Depending on the format I'm going to shoot, I'll have to open one or the other doors. Since this one has the 6x45 mask inside, I'll open this window and I'll start winding and winding, and you'll see dots or lines appear in the window as the number gets close. And as you get closer, the dots get closer together, and when the number shows up, make sure to line it up so it's exactly in the middle of the window, and try not to pull it too far. You want to be exactly in the middle of the window so you have good frame spacing. So once the number is lined up, the camera is ready to shoot. The top of this camera, this is, as I said, the Wester 6R. We have a rangefinder focusing ring here. We have a shoe to mount a flash gun. We have the release button, which opens the front of the camera, and a shutter release button, and as I mentioned before, the winding knob. So to use the camera, we have to open it, and we have to push the button on the top here like so. I always hold the face down so gravity will help open it. This camera, I'm sure, hasn't taken a photo since maybe Kennedy or Johnson was president of the United States. So it's probably going to be a little bit slow and sluggish and sticky. I already have this camera listed for sale on my Etsy store. I'll be overhauling this camera tonight, so if you decide, if someone buys this thing over the weekend or whatever, it'll be ready to go by Tuesday when the shipping day comes next. So, when the front is open, on the front here we have the lens assembly and the shutter assembly. This is a leaf shutter which fits in between the lens. You focus this lens by turning it on the front. You set the shutter speed by turning the ring behind the front lens. We have a shutter charging lever here, which you have to push to the right to charge the shutter. We have a PC sync socket here, so you can attach a modern flash to this camera if you want to use a flash. And on this side here, we have the part of the aperture ring. They just have a small part of it exposed, so you don't accidentally bump into it. And there's an arrow which moves back and forth to show you which aperture you have selected. So the normal process of taking a photograph with the camera is compose, focus, and shoot. With these kind of cameras with an uncoupled rangefinder, you should focus, compose, and shoot. Or maybe I got the first one wrong. But anyway, focus, compose, and shoot. So to focus with an uncoupled rangefinder, what you do is you look through the viewfinder at your subject, and you turn the rangefinder focusing dial until the split image is lined up in the viewfinder. And once it's lined up, you take a look at the number which is showing on the dial, and then you turn the front of the lens until the same number is against this pointer. So the camera is then in focus. Then you charge the shutter, and then you would compose your shot, and then you would shoot. So as you can see, the shutter is a little bit slow on this one. I'll be overhauling that tonight, so tomorrow it'll be working in good shape. To move on to the next exposure, you would wind it, open the door, and wind the film until the number 2 is centered exactly in the window. Then you would focus, charge the shutter lever, and compose, and then shoot again. And that's pretty much all there is to it. We don't have many other things to describe on the camera. On the bottom, this particular camera has a standard 1/4-inch tripod socket, so you can use it on any modern tripod. And the shutter button on this one doesn't have an adapter or anything to allow the use of a cable release, but the shutter itself does have a socket on the side where you can attach a cable release. So these are really good for taking larger formats. You can get away with using smaller apertures or tighter apertures for a lot of depth of field and detail. Something you can't do so easily with 35mm and smaller formats. And for such exposures or long exposures, a cable release comes in really handy, and it's quite easy to use on this camera. So anyway, that's it for my review of the Wester 6R. Someone's at my door here, so thank you very much for watching, and I hope you tune in again soon.